End of the meeting, I was understanding that there would be an opportunity for more community involvement, an opportunity for the state to provide some more specific information that they quite clearly lacked last month. And now I find myself here at this meeting that I literally had to dig for to find out even whether this was the right meeting to come to. I found not another information session notice or anything like that, but I found an agenda buried as number 8, an internal discussion that I'm not even sure I know what means. I'm not sure where the information that I think a lot of people wanted from the state, not sure where that is. I'm not sure where the opportunity is for various community members to be appropriately informed and have more input when this is down to a number 8 internal discussion.
May I give you a quick follow-up on that?
Please do.
If you recall, at the end of the last meeting, there was a lot of questions, and I don't believe there was clarity. I don't believe anybody in the commission felt that there was clarity. So I directed the staff to put an agenda for an internal discussion for the planning commission to talk about what we felt was the appropriate next steps, and that the public was there to listen. So that it was be transparent as to where we felt we needed to go. What did we miss from that previous discussion? What do we still need? What do we think the next step is? How do we get the information? So the items that you referred to, the information from the state and so forth, that's still all on the table to be retrieved. So this really is going to be an internal discussion for the planning commission to figure out how do we, where are we going with this? So you're not missing anything. Nothing's been hidden from you. It's a number 8 on the agenda because this is not a decision.
Raw or pure form.
Anything that we request, we don't have it. We're not looking at information. We're not.
So that has.
We're not analyzing the value of things tonight.
Nothing new has been submitted.
Correct. We haven't gone back, and this is really sort of like what was our reaction? We've heard from everybody. This is what was our reaction to that meeting? What do we think is the next step? How do we start to bring that in? So you are absolutely right in line with us. We're not ahead of you. We might even be a little behind you because you know more what you're looking for. But this is a great spot. So
Dusty, I don't think the general public doesn't necessarily realize that we can't talk about any of this
Right.
unless we are in session.
yeah,
Right.
So we haven't had an opportunity to even talk about with each other about what we saw at the last presentation.
Okay.
So since we can't have any of those conversations unless we're here, this is our opportunity to talk about what did we see and what do we need from the state going forward next. It's not a decision time.
Okay, thank you very much.
you're next, sir.
My name is Brad Jackson. I talked at the public forum last month, and I mentioned that I'd be getting together a petition to try to stop the prison from being built. We have convened a group of us, and we're heading out on that. I just wanted to not disrupt your meeting with anything about it, except to say that for the people in the audience that are opposed to the prison, I would like to meet you outside after the meeting and maybe get you to sign our petition. Thank you.
Okay, sir. And do we have anybody, just before you start speaking, I don't have visibility to the online forum tonight since we didn't send out a meeting. That was going to be my question. Sir, you're up.
Thank you. Brendan Witherell, live in Essex town. First of all, I want to thank you, especially Commissioner, you've done a really great job kind of navigating this, and I've been very impressed. So I want to talk about the correctional facility. You know, I understand the need for appropriate humane facilities to house those in our justice system. And I want to be very clear that this is a responsibility that's shared by every Vermonter. All 650,000 of us share that burden equally. When a person's liberties are taken away, I think with that in mind, you know, I want to reiterate it, just an important question that I don't think I heard a clear answer to in any of the materials yet is how do we get fairly compensated for hosting this facility? We're taking on a burden that everybody shares equally. We're centralizing it here. How do we get made whole? And many residents, I think, including myself, you know, feel that there's been current conversations around compensation, primarily through pilot payments. I've heard that mentioned. I've heard the state and our Essex House delegation indicate that, you know, oh, we'd be eligible for pilot payments. But these payments, they're notoriously subject to the legislature's discretion, and they're grossly insufficient, especially for correctional facilities. For instance, this fiscal year, the state allocated $40,000 for pilot payments across all of Vermont's correctional facilities. The South Burlington facility, which was assessed at over $16 million, received $5,797 in pilot funding. So if the state expects Essex to take on this immense burden that comes with lots of costs of hosting this facility, and expects us to take $6,000 in pilot payments, I think we should just stop discussions. It's not worth your time. It's not worth the public's time. It would be deeply unfair to impose extremely high tax burdens on other net positive to bear these possible long-term negative effects on property values, safety, community perception, infrastructure. It's entirely reasonable for our community to expect to receive a substantial financial benefit for taking on this burden. I'd urge this commission to protect the interests of Essex and ensure that we receive some guaranteed, meaningful financial support. I thought a fair starting point would be to say, well, it seems reasonable that everybody in Essex contribute $1, maybe $2 a year, you know, 25 cents a month, 10 cents a month, something minor to our community that goes into our general fund to support us in case we need better police, better infrastructure, whatever it might be. Because this burden, if it moves forward, is going to be with us for 50 or 60 years. And by saying yes now, we're taking on a lot of downside potential risk without any guarantee of some meaningful upside protection. So I hope the state and our local leaders will take this suggestion seriously and prioritize this community before the rest of the state. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you don't need that, can you get a copy of it? Okay. Hey, is there anyone else that would like to offer a comment? We've got 5 minutes left. Awesome. Okay, thank you all, everyone who spoke. Thank you. What? Yes, sir.
So, Catherine, can you tell me, so from the September 12th meeting that you laid out the zoning amendment process, is that somewhere on the website?
It is, it's on the planning commission page.
So is it in the, is it part of the minutes from the meeting?
It could be, but it's a standalone document, and there's a section that says projects that the planning commission is working on.
Okay.
And then so within that, there's a zoning amendment process. I'm not sure what it's called, but something like that.
Okay. So maybe we can put that someplace a little bit easier for folks to find because they're trying to understand the process as to when they're going to the town site and not having to navigate through a whole bunch of stuff to try to find out
It's a new site. We're all still doing it
where,
too.
and those of us who aren't so tech savvy trying to find it. So it would be helpful.
Thank you.
Andrew? Beaver.
Okay. With that, move up, David. Move up.
Bring your chairs up.
Move up.
Bring your chairs up.
Come on, speaker in the back, something like that.
Yes, I will. I talk about it. Good evening. I had Catherine put us on the agenda, on your agenda, to present the Suzie Wilson Road corridor scoping study report. This has kind of been lingering now for a few years. As most of you know, back in 2011, State of Vermont and VTrans said that they were not going to build or complete the circumferential highway. which kind of left this large road, this highway in the middle of our town. And what they did instead was come up with some alternatives and some mitigation efforts for traffic, for not building the circ through Colchester and through Williston. A couple of these projects fell in the Susie Wilson corridor, 2 signal projects at Kellogg Road and Susie Wilson Road. And there was also a pedestrian component to that, which basically addressed some of the need for pedestrian facilities between these 2 intersections on Susie. We've invited Ken Roby, V-Trans representative tonight, to kind of go over and present the scoping report and to look at the preferred alternatives. So I'll turn it over to Ken and we can get going.
Okay, thank you. Hopefully that will come up. Thank you. Excellent. Couldn't speak without my presentation.
For channel 17, I was gonna say, slide that over. Like that.
There we go. Okay, so as if you want to go to the first slide, that'd be great. There you go. So as Aaron was saying, so the Circ Alternatives project involves Select Board on Monday to present to them as well, because they have some decisions to make as part of this study. And then I'll quickly go through the various sections and the alternatives that have come out of the report. So a bit of project history. Again, Circumferential Highway canceled 2010, 2011. Circ Alternative projects were selected at that time. And a lot of those were based on past studies and didn't have new information or weren't packaged in a way that could be handed to V-Trans to move forward. So the CCRPC did the Colchester Essex Network Transportation Study, which is referred to as SENSE. And what came out of SENSE was this Susie Wilson corridor recommendations. So at that time, the town supported the SENSE recommendations out of that report, and that's what moved forward into the V-Trans scoping project. Since that time, and you'll see there's quite a span. It started in 2010. We're now 14 years later. V-Trans has had both WSP and VHB on contract to do various analysis of the various components of this project. And they have developed reports with modifications and updates to the recommendations that came out of the SENSE report. Back in 2018, we were trying to move this forward yet again to get out of the scoping phase, and that's the next hurdle for V-Trans, is we've got to get out of scoping and move this into an actual design project in one way or another. But we need preferred alternatives that are supported by the town before we can do that. So in 2018, back when the town and the village were one voice, we got some comments back that wanted us to look at the Route 15 intersection again and do some further analysis, which we did. And now we've got reports that have everything up to date to the point that we can, and we can hopefully make decisions based on. Again, the reports and study, you had the SENSE recommendations from back in 2014. We have WSP's conceptual design and memo from 2019, and then VHB's updates to both the Route 15 intersection analysis and the Kellogg Road alternatives from 23 and 24. So the 3 action items we'll need from the Select Board will be to confirm support for the Vermont 15 intersection and the Susie Wilson Road corridor. And we say confirm support because nothing's changed necessarily in that area. The concept is the same. It's the same concept that came out of SENSE, and that's what the town has supported right along. So we want them to confirm that support. However, the Kellogg Road intersection, though we had a concept for it out of SENSE, but further analysis showed that initial concept didn't do what we hoped it would. So we've done further analysis, looked at other alternatives. So we have those to present for hopefully the town to pick a preferred alternative. So we'll start with the short ones, the confirms, the 15 intersection and the corridor, and then we'll leave Kellogg Road for last. So this is the concept that came out of the SENSE study as the preferred alternative. So it shrinks the intersection, it eliminates the slip lane coming off from westbound Vermont 15. It eliminates the U-turn slip lane that comes into that intersection. It adds a left turn lane, or an extra left turn lane from Susie Wilson Road onto eastbound Route 15. That was the basic concept for that alternative. Next slide. So after the 2018 request, jump one more for me, thank you. We then took another look, and the part of the basis of the relook in 2018 was that we knew post-COVID traffic patterns had changed. Likely our predictions of future traffic was not the same as what it was back in 2013. Road corridor faster. However, the city of Essex is not in support of the dual lefts because it doesn't work well with what their future plans or a concept of future plans are for Route 15 headed eastbound. So they wanted to make sure, is it truly necessary that the dual lefts be constructed? So the next slide just shows it's the same alternative, it just has a single left turn lane instead of a double left turn lane off from Susie Wilson Road. The next slide's a bunch of numbers. So this is the worst case, so this is the PM peak traffic. Looking out, it doesn't say the year, but I believe it's the 20 years out of when you would look your design year for this intersection. And you'll see the no build is what it would be if we don't do anything, and the level of service is like grading of a report card. A is great, F is bad, everything in between is staggered. And the goal for this intersection is to eliminate any level of service Fs where possible, because those are the extreme delay. And the goal for any V-Trans project for an intersection is to hit level of service C. So that's the target. Level of service D is acceptable, but C is desirable. So the 2019 preferred that it shows, that's the dual left turn lane. The lane reduction is the single left turn lane. So if you go down through, you can see that the dual left turns works better, but the single left turn from a V-Trans standpoint would be acceptable, strictly based on level of service. But what I've circled down in the bottom right is been the express concern for the town of Essex, and that's the queuing on Susie Wilson Road. So the numbers down the bottom are the feet, the length of the queue during that peak hour. And currently, or the no build with nothing being done, you have about 510 feet or 509 feet. The preferred, it goes down to 339 feet, and the single lane bumps up to 547 feet. The key point of that is the center of the intersection with Lowe's, and that signalized intersection is 500 feet from the stop bar. So the preferred alternative would maintain at your worst time of day, traffic would not back up into that intersection at the Lowe's Drive, whereas the single lane would. That's the primary physical or visible difference between these two alternatives, other than the fact that just from a strictly operational standpoint, the two lane works better. So all of our conversations so far with Aaron and Kent through this, the town supports the dual left turns. V-Trans prefers the dual left turns, so that is our recommended preferred alternative. And then we would move forward with scoping that further once we have the concept approved. Any questions on that one before we move on to the corridor? Yep.
It's all town land that we're talking about.
Correct. Yep. So the entire intersection is town land except for the corner where the slip lane is. That's city property. And then the city property eastbound picks up a few hundred feet east of the intersection. Anything else on this one? Okay. Corridor improvements are simpler, I hope. The goal of this one is to take a look at that area between Route 15 and Kellogg Road and unify what the traffic patterns look like, and then also provide ample shoulders, as ample as possible, for bicycle use, and continuous sidewalks all the way through. All of this being done without creating significant impacts outside of the existing right-of-way beyond the backs of the sidewalk that are there today. So our consultant went through, they did that, they did conceptual plans. There is a full set of conceptual plans that you can look at if the interest is there. But basically what it allows is 5 lanes of traffic on Susie Wilson Road for the whole corridor. So 5 11-foot lanes. It'd be 2 lanes in each direction and then a center lane that would have various turning lane capacity depending on where you are along through. 4-foot shoulder on either side, and then a 5-foot sidewalk either directly behind the curb or slightly offset depending, or slightly separated from the road depending on where you are in the corridor. So that's the typical section. The next shot gives you, it's kind of blurry, it's not a great graphic, I apologize for that, but this is generally what it would look like. To your left is Route 15, and that's the first Lowe's intersection, and then moves north from there. And again, you can just see the 4-lane travelway with the center lane varying for left turns depending on the direction. Next slide is the same. That brings us almost up to the Kellogg Road intersection. So if the concept is acceptable, that's what would move forward into a design project with V-Trans to then look at, are there other ways to tweak the design to increase the benefits, whether it means trying to get some extra shoulder width if we can, trying to get some more offset between the curb and the sidewalk, again, if we can, but we have to get into the higher level of design before we can determine any of that. Okay. That's all I have for this that corridor. So any questions on that?
Yeah. When it went in, there was considerable discussion on the car wash. How it was originally only going to be an entry into the car wash with no exit out from that path. This is when it was just the car wash.
Yep.
And the exit was over into the, I don't remember the road name, but it was into the
Blair
Pine Woods
Road.
Road.
Yep.
When the apartment went in, all of a sudden there was a 2-way entrance and exit out of that space. This looks like if we're essentially creating a wider space, more lanes. Is that being accommodated? Because your last slide didn't go far enough.
Right, and it does vary. There's very limited widening of the roadway itself. It'd be a few feet one side of the other, and it varies as you go down through the corridor. So there's no areas where you'd have significant roadway widening, and the curb will be, I'll say, generally where it is today, aside from that minor widening. So it shouldn't create a significant difference there, but certainly an area we can look at if and when this moves into design.
I got something back from the 15 intersection, unless you get more for this.
Yeah, sure.
When that was originally or last done or last redesigned, the right turn lane from Susie Wilson to 15 was specifically designed with Dennis's approval at the time to be wide enough to be able to allow trucks to be able to make the turn, semis to make the turn without having to go out and
Wider turning radius on that inside corridor is something that would have to be looked at in the design phase.
that inside turn was very specifically done like that, left wider so that they could make that turn without having to drift over.
Makes sense. Yeah, we don't want vehicles to have to leave their lane in order to make that corner. Yep.
Okay, that was the 2 thoughts.
Okay, so then we'll call this one the new intersection just because it's multiple alternatives that we'll be looking at here. So this one has gone through many phases. So again, there was a concept, there were multiple alternatives that were looked at during the SENT study, and just a revised intersection is what came out as the preferred alternative. So that's what we started with as our starting point for looking at how can this work and what benefits does it provide. That's directly out of the study itself. You'll see it adds a second left turn lane from northbound Susie Wilson Road onto Kellogg Road. It widens Kellogg Road to continue with 2 lanes to accept those 2 left turn lanes, and it also widens Kellogg Road to add a left turn lane to head northbound on Susie Wilson Road. So there's significant widening that would happen in that area. The large landscaped island that's there today would shrink significantly to most likely just a concrete island and not landscaped. And the dual lanes on Kellogg Road would have to continue, if not to, and I'm gonna space on the first intersection. Is that Gauthier? The first street where, yep, or down to New England. The dual lanes would have to continue quite a ways down through. We wouldn't be able to bring them into a single lane until you got past that next intersection. So it would be significant work on Kellogg Road to bring those 2 lanes back towards Colchester. With these intersections, they're, as you can see, they're very wide from stop bar to stop bar, northbound to southbound on Susie Wilson Road. So no matter what we did with the configuration, even adding lanes, we weren't able to get a large benefit from a level of service standpoint. So once the analysis was done and we saw what the benefits were and how marginal they were, yet what the impacts would be with this alternative and the cost, working with Dennis and Aaron, we said we need to look at some other alternatives, look at some other things that might have more bang for the buck, because it really wasn't worth pursuing this one with the limited benefits that came out of it. And also there was great concern both on VTrans side and on Essex side of continuing the 2 lanes on Kellogg Road and having that merge further down in conflict with other movements along that corridor. So moving forward in the analysis, and again, knowing that the traffic volumes projections likely had dropped, we said, let's take a look at this without the dual lefts onto Kellogg Road. Let's go back to a single left turn on Kellogg Road and see what we can do with the revised traffic projections for this area. And also, what can we do to tighten the intersection up as much as possible to try to minimize the clearance time it takes just for a vehicle to get from point A to point B inside the intersection. So we did that. This is the modified 2019 preferred. And without a lot of surprise, it doesn't perform great. So it actually performs equal or less good than the previous alternative that had a bigger footprint. So it wasn't an immediate win with just trying to modify that preferred alternative. And a lot of the issue with this intersection is the very low volume leg of Blair Road that comes in on the right. So anybody that is familiar with the area, it's very low volume, not much happens there, but you have to give it a dedicated phase in order for it to safely function where it is. And again, the clearance times for that extra phase just drop the level of service significantly. So we wanted to ponder what are ways to either remove Blair Road from the intersection or treat it differently so that we can reduce some of the negative impacts of that leg. So the first one we looked at, which is the next slide, we call it the Blair Road right in, right out intersection. So it takes Blair Road out of the signalized intersection altogether. So it would become its own stop-controlled intersection, no traffic signal control, but it would be restricted to right turns from Susie Wilson Road onto Blair Road and right turns leaving Blair Road to exit. So they would no longer be able to take a left turn onto Susie Wilson Road. And if you're familiar with that area, to the right of the screen, it's primarily residential, except for one construction company that is kind of placed between old Susie Wilson Road and new Susie Wilson Road. And the only other exit from that area is along Pioneer Street to Pinecrest. So there is access in and out. However, the one negative of this alternative is that all that traffic that currently goes from the neighborhood directly to Susie Wilson Road would have to continue through the neighborhood to get to Pinecrest instead of going directly to Susie Wilson Road. Everything else we hoped for this concept proved out in the analysis by bringing the intersection in to be significantly shorter. You see how much closer the individual stop bars are to each other. We shrunk the footprint. It makes it better for pedestrians, and the level of service improved significantly in through here. But knowing that, at least for those that live and work in that neighborhood off from Blair Road, losing that level of access is definitely a con. So we wanted to look at some others. So the next one, it's called a cluster intersection. It was a new term to me. I had to ask the consultant. I had no idea what it meant, but it's basically you have a two-phase approach from the north. So Susie Wilson Road would, Blair Road would still be part of the signalized intersection, but it would be restricted to only be able to access the stop condition southbound. You could not go from Blair Road directly to Kellogg Road or Blair Road directly southbound on Susie Wilson Road. So you would leave Blair Road and then pull out and have to follow the traffic signals the same as those are on southbound Susie Wilson Road. It works. You get the same benefits of having the close intersection right at Kellogg Road, but the operational benefits dropped down, not significantly. It still performs quite well, but it is less efficient than the right in, right out, and you also still maintain, the safety concerns of having those additional left turns crossing here at that intersection. The last one we looked at for that area was a complete reconfiguration of Blair Road that would maintain it as fully functional. So it would have access to all three legs and bringing it in as a four-way intersection there apart or across from Kellogg Road. As you can see on the bottom right, that would require a full take of that property on the corner and a full reconstruction of Blair Road in through there. So we thought this one might operate better. It actually operates worse than the other two alternatives that we just looked at. So, and again, the reason being is Blair Road has full functionality and it has its full protected cycle for everything. The level of service of the intersection itself drops down. So those are the 2, 3, and 4 that are on the table for discussion. Are the V-Trans recommendation, as well as talking with the folks here in Essex, is alternative 2. It's the right in, right out, but it's open for discussion.
I personally hate that intersection, and I like the right in, right out, the look of that, but I do know people who live in that neighborhood, and the extra traffic, I understand, would be great for them.
Yep.
I live in that neighborhood,
Oh.
so my husband and I are not a fan of the right in, right out.
Yeah.
Yep.
We're also not a fan of the fact that then all the car wash traffic goes back through our neighborhood and doesn't come right out, because it comes out and it goes left.
It turns left.
And it can't, unless it's not coming back out onto Blair Road and it's coming back out onto Susie Wilson. So I would say we, as people that live in that neighborhood, do have a concern about all the traffic, and it's grown up since we moved in 4 years ago. There are more residential people living there. You're sending that all the way back through our neighborhood. So that is a concern that, from somebody that lives in that neighborhood, I understand the functionality of it. I was pleased to see at least there was an acknowledgement that it's a massive con to that neighborhood.
Yes.
The impact to the traffic going on to Pinecrest, because you do have it, Pinecrest has light on.
Well, it'd be Pinecrest and then Joshua. We discussed that in our house. Like, people are just going to snake. They're not going to just stay on Pinecrest. They're going to dip down and go onto Joshua Way as well, because that light there by the Go-Go Gas doesn't operate very well either. It sits. You sit there for a very long time before you can get a light.
Yep. So as far as operational, in those areas, the volume that comes out of the neighborhood is very low. So it'd be going to intersections that already have those phases and that operate better than the Kellogg Road intersection. So it wouldn't make a significant difference in those. Grab water.
And moving forward in the alternatives that are selected, there will be significant more studying done on impacts to the surrounding infrastructure within. I definitely acknowledge it is a concern of the town as well, but the intersection as a whole, having it perform better for the corridor, looking at the alternatives, go with the one in.
It sounds like the premise for changing the Blair intersection and so forth is that you want to make the intersection itself smaller. Why?
That's one way to make it operate better. So the wider, the greater the distance in your intersection, the less efficiency you have. 'Cause it's that much more clearance time for every vehicle that goes through. So it, every phase requires that much more time.
But you still have to address the 2 lanes going down to Colchester Road anyways. but-
Northbound.
Right.
Susie Wilson.
Yep, and that would stay 2 lanes for a distance, and then they would merge.
They'd merge.
Merge at
So
speed.
if you've added a second lane, you've now cut the wait time in that stack down without necessarily having to adjust the Blair Road intersection at all. And then the same question I had before about truck radius turning is there because those are squared off and trucks don't turn square most of the time unless you've got a really big intersection like they've got now.
Yep.
So you're going to have an effect on that. Last thing, I'm spitballing this here, is if you're moving the intersection, if you're moving Blair up and you're going to potentially have to take that property, if you instead moved Kellogg down, you've got a larger space of property that could, again, if take is the right term, that doesn't impact a structure that would allow you to line those 2 roads up. So you'd still have a 4-way intersection. You've reduced the space, but you're moving. It's a greater move, but you're not going to have a overtly negative impact on the people that live in that section, which a right turn only will. Anyways,
Right, so well, if I'm following you, but first I'll go back to your first question just to, or comment to address that one. So the concept with the dual lefts off from Susie Wilson Road, off from Kellogg Road, headed onto Susie Wilson, that was the analysis in alternative 1. So with just that and no change to Blair Road, you don't get hardly any operational benefit. So that's why we had to look beyond that piece of it. And I also should have mentioned this right up front. These 4 alternatives, these are schematics for traffic analysis. So these aren't design plans. So they don't have the proper radii necessarily. They don't have the proper widths at this point. They're strictly a sketch for traffic analysis. Those things will definitely be looked at during the actual design phase to make sure they have adequate turning radii and such. As far as shifting Kellogg Road, could it be done? I don't see why it couldn't. You would still have a full take, so that the building on the northwest corner would be a full take versus the building on the southeast corner, or to do the full square up and making it a 4-way intersection. So one way or the other, it'd be a full take.
only if you're looking at right angle. It's not a right angle now, it's an offset.
Yep.
If you're shrinking the space, there's no, again.
Right.
It doesn't necessarily, in my mind, and this isn't my field of study.
Mhm.
It doesn't seem that you need to have it square. If you're reducing the space to gain the efficiency, anyways.
Yeah. So you do, from a general design standpoint, you want it as close to square as possible, or you can't get adequate turning radii on those tighter corners. So the closer you are to square, the easier you have for traffic motions in through there. It doesn't have to be perfectly square, but the closer to square, the better. But the operation would be the same in that side. So the modeling from a traffic standpoint would be the same result whether you moved Kellogg or moved Blair Road.
What's the impact on the construction company that's there if you're talking about right in, right out? So now the construction equipment would actually be going through the neighborhood as opposed to a quick access
Correct.
to Susie Wilson Road.
Yep. Yeah. So that is part of that con of that alternative, and
And that's something that does, at least from public works perspective, is not ideal. We would not want tandem trucks rolling through a residential neighborhood, especially our roads. It's going to cause excess wear and tear on them. And just the factor of it being a residential neighborhood, we don't want that.
So is that in
How that
sort of
works.
forcing the construction company to do something different?
There would be alternatives. They could take alternate routes, in, out.
There are no alternate.
There are no alternate
There
outs.
are no
If they're,
routes.
Attempts taking a left out of
There's only
off
one.
of Blair without a light there.
Yeah, but my point is that it's a construction company that I've watched grow over the years of going through that intersection. There are more and more trucks that are there, so then you're now putting them in a position they have to decide, can they even stay there, right? Is that, I mean,
Looking at a significant increase in performance, or are we looking at a very small
Yep,
percentage?
if you go 3 or 4 slides ahead, I did throw in the traffic data here, so it helps to look at. The no build that you see in that level of service column, you see is C's, D's, E's, and F's. There's a couple A's and B's off from Susie Wilson Road in certain directions. But as you move to the right, you'll see alternative 1 was the generally leave it based on the previous recommendation. Alternative 2 is Blair Road, right in, right out. Alternative 3 is the cluster intersection. Alternative 4 is the new 4-way. So you can still see level of service Fs in the alternative 1, which is not acceptable as far as spending money to make an improvement, and you don't get rid of those failure movements. So then the next 2 you'll see they're very similar. The right in, right out, and the cluster intersection, but the right in, right out is superior from an operational standpoint. And then lastly, the other, you'll still see a lot of D's and E's in there, so you just don't get that same benefit for the investment in through there. If you want to look deeper into the study, you can look at queue lengths and delay times, which are the either side of that intersection. But typically, the higher you get up on the grading scale, closer to A, the better the intersection functions over time. And then section 1, the next sheet that's on here as well is just the PM peaks. Very similar story. You just get failure in different directions depending on where the primary mode of direction of travel is in the morning versus the afternoon.
Is this project an all or nothing? So like this could be the Susan Wilson Road and a board that
Correct. Yep. So the no build is always an option. So, and that's generally what we were looking at when we did that first round of analysis and said it really doesn't justify the investment to get this minor improvement. So if that was all we could have done, likely the no build was a no-brainer answer. You know, why throw millions of dollars at an intersection for no improvement? But there are ways to improve it. It's just a matter of whether the pros outweigh the cons, you know, moving forward with this intersection, because you are somewhat limited. As you probably know, that intersection originally was designed with the idea of the circumferential I-15 in the corridor or Kellogg, any combination. Yeah. Because one of the other steps after we get a decision is how does this project going to move forward, and what's it going to look like? Well, 1 project, 3 projects, V-Trans managed, town managed. So
what's the timetable? Like, these goes
14 years?
it is very hard to say right now. I sat in a presentation earlier this week where the current V-Trans budget for 5 years of projects that they currently have in their program is 12 years of funding. So go ahead.
Would the neighborhoods around affected be notified?
Oh,
I mean, I didn't even know this was a thing until I was on this
Right.
commission and saw this packet. So I'm just concerned that those that live on the Susie Wilson corridor are not even aware
Yes,
of
and
these
this is part of
potentials.
that process, that public outreach.
Okay.
It's coming to the planning commission, getting as many of the residents involved with this. We're going to the select board to select the preferred alternative. If it comes to be that this is not the option to choose, as Ken was saying earlier, we can choose preferred alternative for Susie and the corridor itself, and we can look at different alternatives for the Kellogg Road.
It seems like it would be a good project to, since it's being directed, at least initially, by the select board. It would seem like it would be a good project to have a regular touch base with the planning commission after January 1 to help guide sort of what either regulations or whatever might be going in, because if you're gonna be doing something where you're drastically changing the way that Susie Wilson is used, then that should affect the businesses and the zoning and so forth. And, you know, there's always been guidance to try to get the lot connectivity off from Susie Wilson Road and be behind developments. Because there's so many separate landowners, they haven't always agreed, but, you know, that may become more of a requirement instead of a good idea.
And that's why we reached out to Catherine to get this on your agenda. Start the process, folks. Planning Commission.
Trevor has his hand up.
Trevor?
Yes, will the signals on Susie Wilson Road be coordinated?
They're going away, you're putting roundabouts in.
That was considered in the sense report.
I like roundabouts.
Yeah, they have their place.
But certainly along that corridor and the more time that passes, you may upgrade the signals on that corridor before any project ever comes out from V-Trans, for all we know. But yes, that would have to be looked at, whether it be equipment upgrades, timing changes, coordination, et cetera, for that whole corridor. And to your point about the backlot connections,
Yeah.
Recommendations for that did come out of the sense report as well, but that's outside the purview of V-Trans being private property, and so it's not been wrapped into this.
Kind of resides in our wheelhouse to work with staff and projects that come in.
Yeah, I mean, if knowing that would be, we start codifying the need to have that, you know, off the main road interlot connectivity. So, interesting. Okay. Any other questions, thoughts, comments? Trevor? Glad you good? He's good. All right. Any last minutes? Last additions?
No, I encourage you all to, if you have additional comments, both you folks on the Planning Commission and or the public, to definitely reach out. Maybe
Ken Hiko is proposing a 4-lot minor subdivision located at 9 Colonel 4-lot minor subdivision located at 9 Colonel Page Road. Kent, are you ready?
I think so.
Need a minute?
I was just gonna pull up the plan. We were just- Nope, oh, that's Pinewood.
The other one that's not,
Came across just today. Something came up soon fused.
thank you, that's great.
What was the school?
It's in Burlington.
Y'all ready?
I'll get it back. Yes.
Swear.
No, well, if you want, we'd like to be nice about it, but yes, thank you very much for that. So, if anybody who's going to be presenting on this one or the next one, if you would please raise your hands and we'll swear you in.
Presenting or speaking.
Presenting or speaking about this application or the next one. So, do you swear that any testimony you present this evening will be truthful to the best of your ability?
Yep.
Thank you.
I do.
Thank you. Good catch. All right.
In the future, so, that's shown on this plan here, the overall entire site that has the, potential future 4 lots. Would you mind clicking on the other one? Then, this is the spot where they're proposing, at this point, to create 2 additional lots. On the left side of the screen is an existing barn and house, and this would be creating 2 new lots with 2 new houses. Looking at it at this point, it seems like there's no particular red flags that have come up with it. It's in the Scenic Resource Protection Overlay District, but the applicant provided information about what the existing views are and projecting the future views, which doesn't seem to have any particular negative impacts. There is an opportunity where
they have a right-of-way shown there that could access future lots along with narrow easement area that goes from the left to the right across the screen over into where there's the Alderbrook area that seems like there's a really good opportunity for keeping that area open as a wildlife corridor in the future as well, just by making sure that it's not blocked. So that's something to think about. And the only other things I would add to it is this was brought up to the Conservation and Trails Committee meeting at the meeting on Tuesday night, and they did provide a few comments that can be forwarded along to the applicant. One, they were looking into, they were interested in if there might be a potential for a right-of-way easement for multi-use trail along Colonel Page Road, similar to other projects down on Colonel Page, to actually do something. That was something that they wanted to provide. They were really interested in what kind of protective measures could be done along the Alderbrook area. There's also a wetlands overlay district area. There's an area that's not going to be developed along there, so it's already fairly well protected, but they want to make sure that it is protected as well as possible. They were also interested in the connectivity for the wildlife being kept open along that corridor. And then they also just wanted to pass along that it looks like you're keeping a lot of the existing trees on the site, and they wanted to talk about that. Otherwise, I don't have anything else particular to
Okay. Commissioners, any questions for Kent?
Nope, not for me.
I do have, Trevor, it looks good. Okay. I do have one, and you can maybe address this too, John. That I'm getting old, my memory's not necessarily good, but I'm pretty sure we hammered on it quite a bit because this was taking a pretty big area. And I want to make sure we're not missing anything that was a condition then. I was here for that, so that's long, that was a while ago.
Okay, I didn't turn up anything with that, but I'll look into it. That would have been for the previous property owner before you purchased.
No, it might have been maybe before that. It was Brad Morris. It was a Morris application, and I can't tell you exactly when that was,
It's
but
a file folder.
I'll take a look.
okay.
It was 2010 with Brad.
So it would have been previous to that.
No, Brad was the developer that I'm talking about. Brad Morris's development. He purchased it from whoever that previous owner was, and he did the subdivision and the build up out of. So anyways, that's more for you at this stage. But
Okay, yep.
okay. With that, turn it over to you guys.
Good evening, John Stewart and Ken Echo. Really not much to add to the description here. Two house sites on lots 2 and 3, which are roughly 3 and 4 acres respectively. The houses are back along the tree line and out of basically out of any scenic corridor towards the east, which is rather significant when the leaves are off. There'll be a shared driveway that splits once it's inside along the tree lines, like Kent mentioned. Those tree lines will be preserved to be, and essentially it's that describes what the project is about.
Questions for the applicant? Then I'd take a motion to open the public hearing.
I'll make a motion to open a public hearing.
I'll second.
Moved by Ian, seconded by Georgia. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 6-0. Didn't ask who denied because we all counted. We all said aye. That's in case somebody's getting picky. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to offer comment on this application, the sketch plan application? Okay, we'll leave it open for a minute and just bounce around. So, when you guys were looking at, did you guys review the previous, Brad's approval and so forth at that point?
Not prior to Brad's involvement.
Not Brad's, but Brad did the development for that.
Right.
And I just want, I mean, I'm remembering a pretty in-depth discussion, and I don't remember the conditions, and we weren't doing things on file at that point, so I don't, my records don't go back that far. I guess from my perspective, I'd want to either, I potentially could approve this for that sketch, but I'd want to see how it compared to that initial development, the approval before I would want to see it go forward. Ian, any thoughts, questions?
I have no questions on this.
Georgia?
Nope, I'm good.
Stephanie?
Good.
Trevor? Thoughts, questions? You good? Okay. John?
Yeah, I would like to just ask the applicant if you have any problems with some of the comments that you got from Public Works about the width of the road or the length of the culvert or any of that stuff. You're all good with that?
Fine.
Okay.
Good. Okay. Take a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
I'll second.
Moved by Shu, seconded by Ian. All those in favor of closing the public hearing?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 6-0. Public hearing is closed. We've had this discussion. Would anyone like to offer a motion? Georgia, did I hear you?
Sure. I'll make a motion, we approve the sketch plan for, let's see, a 4-lot minor subdivision located at 9 Colonel Page Road,
As written?
as written.
I'll second.
You second it? I would just like, no, I wouldn't even say that. I would like to have in there, I know we don't do conditions on sketches anymore, but I would like to have a comment that I'd like to verify that the conditions, there are no outstanding conditions from the Morse subdivision at that time, because that was where we started getting, that was really this was the originator for a lot of our conservation subdivision process. So I think there were it may have just been discussion points and not conditions, and that's fine. But I know that this was a trigger lot at that time.
Make that condition finding
Yeah, or craft it into the, you want to put it in as a friendly amendment, or you want to just put it in?
the PC finding.
Would you accept that as a friendly
Yes,
amendment?
friendly amendment.
I would second that.
Okay, do we have to move that? Or is that just,
No.
it's just offered as a friendly amendment and they both accept it, so we're good? Okay, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Did we lose Trevor? I think we might.
Oh, there he
Aye.
is.
Okay, there he is. Motion, this is continued from July 25th of this year. The public hearing is still in play, it's still open. Once you guys come on up to the table, we won't be taking public comment just yet. I'm gonna wait until we go through the staff and applicant, and then we'll engage if anyone from the public wishes to provide comment. Kent?
Okay. So like you mentioned, this was continued, so I'm not going to do the full wind-up about the project. I just want to bring to your attention the new information that I've included in the staff report. The applicant provided some more specific numbers about the impacts to the steep slopes, which I've summarized in there. So those have been included in a couple spots in the staff report, in addition to the recommendations section at the end. And just to read through that really quick, they mentioned that of the 115 acres of the overall site, that their design is proposing to disturb 12.21 acres of that area. And of the 12.21 acres of land to be disturbed, 7.1 acres or 58% of the area is calculated to impact steep slopes. Of those 7.1 acres of steep slopes to be impacted, 5.06 acres or 71% of the impacted steep slope areas are slopes that are 20% grade or steeper. So 41% of the land to be disturbed are slopes that are 20% or greater, which are the regulations prohibit. So consequently, staff's again recommending that the Planning Commission denies the application.
Okay.
That's mainly the only new information there. The only other thing I have to add is that also at the Conservation and Trails Committee meeting on Tuesday, they had a couple comments to add. One, they concurred with recommendations in this staff report, and they also mentioned that they had a concern that there's not a proposal at this point of how the open space area would be managed, and that's a requirement of the preliminary design level.
Okay.
That's mentioned in a couple spots earlier in the staff report. There were also a number of other smaller design issues that still need to be resolved, but the main issue really is about the impacts to the steep slope, so that's why it's highlighted in the recommendation section.
Okay. Thank you. Commissioners, questions? Yes?
No.
Oh, okay. Brian?
Yeah, so Brian Courier, Larry Burke Civil Associates, and Brian Marcotte, the owner applicant. So last time we were in front of you in July, we went through a number of items with you folks. The first thing we talked about was the waiver request. It's fairly lengthy, but I'll give you the bullet points. We talked about why this parcel should be granted a waiver for some impacts to steep slopes. What makes it separate than other, lots that are around town? It's a 115-acre parcel zoned in R2, one of the denser zoning districts in the town of Essex. There's 3 access points to the parcel: Stonehenge, Stonebrook, Timberlane, and the third one, Rustic. Well, that's a 4th actually. So. Yeah. Regardless, there's 3 public access points to Section I, a 4th being Rustic Drive, which would inevitably be Section J. The parcel's allocated 76 EUs of sewer allocation. Being in the sewer core in Essex, especially an undeveloped parcel in the sewer core in Essex, is a rarity, especially of this size. The sewer core is being targeted by the state legislature currently, as many of you know, and I've been in front of you pitching projects that qualify for the Homes Act density requirements. That applies to any parcels in towns that have a designated sewer core and municipal water services to a parcel. The state mandates municipalities increase the acreages to those parcels to a 5 units per acre threshold. At 100 acres, that would put us at 500 units. Obviously, that's a theoretical density. This parcel couldn't support that many, but it just shows where the state is trying to target housing. Another piece of this parcel is part of a Pinewood master plan. I think I've said in front of you folks just about every time we've been here, we started at Section A back in the 70s. This is now Section I. It's been a long-standing middle-class neighborhood in Essex, and this is one of the very last phases of the development. The master plan had 73-unit layout, far more aggressive than what's in front of you today, but there's been considerable planning, investment, extending right-of-ways, extending municipal services to fully build out Pinewood. And kind of jumping on my conversation about the Homes Act, you know, VHFA recently passed some reports that talk about, you know, the state of Vermont requiring 24 to 36,000 homes over the next 5 years. I'm not sure how many building permits the town of Essex has issued for residential development. My guess is 10, 15 maybe in the past year, probably similarly the year before. You know, if these types of opportunities are ignored, gaining traction on that goal, you know, not just through multifamily apartment style units, but also single families. We have triplexes, the first multifamily component that Pinewood has ever offered in its long history. So those were the pieces that we thought made this parcel and this opportunity separate from other parcels in Essex that may come in and ask for your consideration for a waiver. Another thing we talked about was Public Works had issued or has issued over the past year certain review comments regarding erosion control and just other design features. I told you at the end of that meeting, after we had a roundtable and we thought we had a lot of positive feedback from the Planning Commission, we had had good conversations with Public Works about how the plan could be changed and our designs altered in order to gain their support for the project in regards to the engineering and erosion control measures. So the biggest change in front of you that hasn't been discussed yet is that we spent a ton of effort and time responding to Hamlin's comments, which there are 2 versions, Public Works comments, which I believe there were 3 versions, and we're down to 4 or maybe 5 items that have nothing to do with erosion control or impacts of steep slope slopes. In our opinion, Public Works is not concerned at the moment, given the EPSC changes that have been implemented to the project. Various details have been added, more straw wattles, more erosion control matting. The biggest change, though, has been over an acre of riprap has been proposed now throughout the project. Most of it's being proposed along the public road, but it's implemented throughout Section I. So that's a huge investment that the applicant has. An item was that they wanted a third-party erosion control inspector to be on site during construction. All right, so that's something that in their public works specifications they have the ability to do if deemed necessary, and we're here to say that we have no problem with that. Rather than having it be a reactionary thing, we're more than happy to have somebody on board day one when the shovels get going. So that was the only follow-up item they had regarding erosion control that we're more than happy to facilitate. Along with DPW and Hamlin's comments that have now been addressed, I'd just like to bring back your attention to the fact that we've had a third-party geotechnical review done. M&W Soils, Randy Rhodes is a licensed professional engineer, done work in town. He has no issues with the problem, with the project or the erosion control measures before we even made the changes that Public Works was asking for. I'd like to bring your attention that we have a construction general permit from the state of Vermont that's specific to erosion control permits. So this was issued by, to the project about a year ago before we actually applied for preliminary. There's 3 levels of erosion control at the state. There's low risk, moderate risk, and individual. This project qualifies for moderate risk. It's in the middle. All right, that permit requires us to only open 5 acres at once. That's a huge difference from any other sections of Pinewood that have been considered in the past. And you know, I'd just like to bring the attention to that Larry Burke has done a ton of work in Essex over 25 years. I'm a licensed engineer. You know, I obviously have my stamp on all the plans. I believe this is a very good set of plans given the constraints of the layout or of the site. Another thing we talked about was additional information. What the planning commission wanted to see. A lot of our prior conversations were staff saying they didn't have enough information. So obviously we provided more numerical data regarding the slope impact. It's been shown on plans, and we've offered approximations in our waiver request. But we facilitated plans that showed the shading, that didn't have hatching on them for roads or buildings or other things that staff thought was clouding or that they needed more information regarding. That's been provided, and I don't believe any more requests for information on the staff report. If they are, I think they're likely minor, and maybe I just missed them. But I believe staff is no longer asking for additional information. So, you know, I felt like at our last meeting, we definitely had a positive outlook on where we're headed. We offered a lot of explanation regarding the waiver and why this parcel is special, why this parcel deserves to be fully developed as part of one of the last phases of Pinewood. The DPW comments have been addressed in totality, a few minor final issues, and then all the additional information that we went back and forth with you, which also included triplex elevations, additional shading plans for staff, and the engineering comments have all been provided to you folks. So we feel that we're back in front of you tonight because we've lived up to what we said. I remember I closed last time saying I would come in front of you with a set of plans that would be approvable for a final plan submittal. And I feel we've done that.
Okay. Thank you. Commissioners, questions for the applicant?
Yeah, what would you, if you were going to take this 107-page waiver and sugar it down to a few sentences, what are you trying to ask us to do?
So the waiver basically hits on that base zoning is R2. There's public access. It's in a sewer core. There's a previously approved master plan. And then state legislature actions have really focused densities in these sorts of areas. So it's basically hits the highlights of, you know, everything that's been done leading up to the full build out of Pinewood Section I. Obviously, 96 EUs of sewer allocation wouldn't be assigned to a parcel without substantial municipal facilities to support.
And you would say, so the waiver is the primary obstacle on us granting the waiver for the planning commission is really just whether or not we think it meets the criteria to allow the development on the steep slopes.
It talks, so the waiver criteria is how can the planning commission move the project forward with the least impact while still meeting the goals and objectives of the town plan and the zoning regulation. So there's one zoning regulation that says you shall not impact slopes greater than 20%. Now 15 to 20 has been represented as a steep slope. I firmly disagree. It says it's discouraged. It doesn't say you shall not impact. Right? So there's one zoning regulation that essentially is staff has highlighted in this staff report and has stated over and over again, compared to plan unit development, which is meant to cluster units in the most unimpactful areas and leave open space. There's a tremendous amount of open space being proposed as part of this project. I believe it's roughly 100 acres or 80 acres. Substantial amount of open space. We're consolidating units through triplexes, private driveways, If you remember, our sketch plan conversation was allowing 4 units off a driveway, which hadn't been done in Essex before, outside of a scenic resource area. So we're doing our very best to minimize impact to the greatest extent possible while still realizing that this is a large parcel that's zoned for density, that's in a sewer core, that has public access, and should be developed as it was intended.
Okay, I don't really have any other questions right this moment.
Okay. Stephanie?
No.
Trevor?
Well, I would just ask the question, I mean, 20% is a steep slope. And, I was looking at different zoning regulations, different places across the country today, and there's nothing unusual or pulled out of the air about 20%. Most places have that across the country. But I saw one that interested me, and I would ask you this question. If you want the waiver, I saw some places where they say that they will not allow development of anything that's over 25%, absolutely prohibited. So, with what you have now, how much is over 25%?
I don't have that number for you. I don't have that number for you, Trevor. The standard is 20 and more, so that's what we looked at. Regarding it being a steep slope, Public Works details, and I've done grading plans for a very long time. We constantly grade at a 1-on-2, 1-on-3 slope. In my opinion, 20% is fairly minimal. When you're looking at 20% slopes, I think something that's not considered in the zoning regs, and it's very narrow in its intent. 20% slope over a short area, say 10 feet horizontally, is nothing. So there's various spots that, when you add them up, add to our 20% total, but I don't think anyone's in this room believes that a roadside ditch is within the 115 acres. Once you move towards 289, towards Lang Farm, it's incredibly steep and carries a lot of ravines through there. My opinion is that that is what the standard is meant to protect, not areas where there's variable slope. I think we've had conversations of all the speckling of the different slopes. So we provided shading plans that have slopes from 0 to 15 shaded a certain color, from 15 to 20 shaded a certain color, and 20 plus shaded a certain color. And where the developments are proposed, it's a speckling of all three throughout those areas. I don't think there's any question that where those areas are mixed or where there's small concentrations of the steeper end slopes, that's not really the intent of protecting 20% slopes for environmental protection. Now, the only spot that I see where this regulation may come into play is where we're proposing the public road. Now, the public road, about halfway down, 600 feet down, crosses a fairly substantial ridgeline. The reason being is that where the cul-de-sac is located is the flattest spot on Section I. That's where 5 triplexes are proposed, which are consolidated and highly dense, more dense in that area because that is the flattest spot. In order to cross that area, that's where probably ½ acre to 3/4 acres of riprap is now proposed per the direction of Public Works on either side. So yes, there's 5 acres of 20% slope throughout. Now, I should mention, it's not on staff report, but there's 47 acres of slopes greater than 20% within the 100-acre parcel that's not in a river corridor, which is along Alderbrook, adjacent to 289. So there's more than 47, but for 47 acres, we're impacting 5. That's roughly 10% of the slopes on the parcel.
So let me jump in. Kent, what you've got in the staff report. There's a comment. It's Article 5B2. Steep slopes. Development is discouraged on slopes of 15% or steeper due to the likelihood of erosion and stormwater runoff problems. Development shall be prohibited on slopes of 20%. So we're not really talking about opinions or what it should be. This is maybe one of those areas where we should improve the regulation and be more accurate in what we're looking for. But it doesn't say, it doesn't give us the latitude in my reading of it. And this has been a long process. We're getting here. How many times have you've been before us with this? Preliminary. I know. And we come down to a recommendation from staff that it says it doesn't meet the regulation, period. We should deny. So
a waiver, right? If it's a shall not, there is a provision to provide a waiver for various purposes, meeting the intent, by impacting or changing or altering that regulation to the minimum extent possible. So it is a subjective decision. It's not a black and white decision, in my opinion.
yeah. Commission, thoughts, questions?
I have a question.
Speak out.
I was here the last time you presented, and I remember distinctly that when we were wrapping up, we talked about trying to formulate what the benefits were for the waiver, right? We were looking for what is it that would make us, put us in a position saying this is the benefit that we're going to get because of the waiver. And I've heard a lot about like the state's great push for housing now, which is a new push. And I've heard a lot about all of the development work that's been going into this particular project, but I still haven't quite heard, aside from the state's push and the need for housing, what the waiver, what is the benefit for us to say, what are we getting back? What is the town getting back for the waiver?
Yeah, so it's a 34-unit housing development in the midst of a housing crisis that is impacting employers. We've lost 2 young kids already this year because they don't see themselves growing up in a house that their parents had. Housing is just incredible constriction to Vermont. So we're not a commercial business. We can't provide jobs other than the contractors. Tax base that's associated with the 32 units. There's very little public infrastructure proposed as part of this. We're also looping a water main that Public Works has been after for a very long time.
Thank you. That's what I was looking for.
The number that we're seeing for the first time, or I'm seeing for the first time, is the 7.1 acres, the 41% greater than 20, the 41% of the developed area greater than 20% slope. And that, I know there's different ways to get that number. Was that a number you came up with, Kent, or?
No, the applicant provided.
Okay, because that really gives me pause. And I care a lot about the housing crisis, but I don't know if the housing crisis justifies a waiver. Even building the sewer core, I can't really see how you get from here to there. 41% is a lot.
Just to be clear, we offered 5 acres of 20% in our waiver request, and that's been out there for quite some time.
Unless we have more direct comments or questions, let's open it up to anybody in the public has any questions or comments regarding this application.
Dave.
Oh, please.
I wanted to, David Scopin, 11 Skyline Drive, and I wanted to thank those who responded to the information I provided for you all in the 18-minute head talk. Hopefully everyone has received something that I should have been able to distribute to the rest of you recently, which is a bit of information that's provided from a different source. This one is a national climate assessment, the 5th National Climate Assessment, which came out in 2023. It's a government document that looks into climate change and how it's going to impact different areas throughout the entire country, including Vermont. And we find online, which is very easy to come by if you haven't gotten it, it's on YouTube. It's Climate Outlook Vermont at 2C. The reason I bring this up is this is a young woman who worked as a scientist, worked for NASA. She has since quit her job and has become part of what they call American Resiliency for the specific purpose of providing the public understandable access to this rather lengthy and technical document. And she looks at Vermont and says that we're looking pretty darn good, which means we will probably find folks who want to relocate to Vermont. So we will need housing. That is understood. But what she's pointing out is that we have a little bit of a problem, which everyone was made aware of very recently. Montpelier is one, Barry. You have St. Johnsbury. Now, the other thing that's happened, and a lot of us are not as aware of, is we've had deluge-type rains in the Lake Champlain region recently, within the last probably at least 5 years. But it's become more common, and I think you can see some of the results of this. What we're talking about here is rains that once upon a time we would have said that's a 100-year flood. Well, we're getting them more frequently, and we can expect that will be a new norm. As just like we can expect that 2023 was the warmest year on record. Going forward, that will seem like a rather moderate uptick. Now, this is something, unfortunately, it will have an impact on, eventually, on our community. And we're not really certain, I'm not really certain how my sandy soil is going to respond to getting 7-10 inches of rain in a short period of time. I know what happened in Asheville, and it didn't look pretty. Now that was 10 or 20 inches of rain with a high of 31. Some small town in North Carolina received 31 inches. That obviously may not ever occur. But when we're thinking of soil engineers, etc., who have worked in our area for 20 years, we're up against something that's extremely new to everyone. The other thing is that when I was looking through, I'm not going to go into steep slopes because I think that's obvious. But when I was looking through what the town of Essex plan is, a lot of it has to do with smart growth. Smart growth is concentrating, and actually I was looking also, I found this very interesting, at the Housing Commission. Their goals are to have affordable housing so that...
David, let me interrupt just for a minute.
Yeah.
And I appreciate the details that you're leading us through, but I'd like to have it directed more towards this application, more directly. If you can link us directly to this application.
I can indeed. One of our goals is to have growth that permits people to get to schools, jobs, food, health care, etc. And a perfect opportunity we have before us, which is the development that's proposed at the Essex Experience and the one over in Saybrook. And there's a piece of land right near the golf course that hopefully someone will want to develop. It'll be concentrated housing. People will actually.
But we're talking about this application, so let's focus on
Okay, well, this
bring us to
application,
this.
unfortunately, is in an area that is not does not have easy access to any of this. This is a community that is becoming increasingly aware of how to deal with climate change. And one of them is you do not cut down trees, which are storing carbon. Now, I know that I've heard people talk about the trees grow. They do, but an existing tree that is 75 years old has sequestered more carbon than many, many dozens of nursery stock bald and burlap. And in other words, they don't equate. You don't cut anything down if you can avoid it. And going in and cutting down just 5 or 10 acres is not acceptable. It's not smart growth. It doesn't meet a need. It's not affordable housing by any stretch of the imagination. And I think that Kent is correct when he says this application should be denied.
Excellent.
With that, I thank you very much for your time.
Okay. As always, you bring us a lot of detail. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
There are 2 people online that
Okay.
Ken Sigrel. There was others.
Ken, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm speaking to you as the chair of the Conservation and Trails Committee. I thank Kent for including our action last Tuesday. We did concur with the staff's recommendation. We also noted that our town has just in the last 5 years experienced road washouts, at least 3 that I can name: Leak Road, Brigham Hill Road, Tower Road and Leak Road being paved. This application, I believe, has public roads that the town is would be responsible for if this waiver is granted, and then the application approved. And that's a concern. I think that the 3 washouts I mentioned were not even on steep slope areas. So I think it's reasonable to be concerned that those new roads would wash out as well. The town would be on the hook for repairing them. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Yes.
If town committees are talking about our project, shouldn't we be invited to those committee hearings? Is that not?
They're public meetings, and
Yeah,
the agendas are
right.
posted.
I'm not going to get into it.
Regulations, 2 days, 48 hours before the meeting.
Yeah, I just, in the future, I guess, inviting the applicant, I would say would be.
That we never have in the past, and haven't discouraged it, but it's all
Okay.
our agendas are public, and development review is covered as a standard
Okay.
part.
It's part of our mission to advise the planning commission.
Usually we get the reports here. We haven't seen it. Okay. The other person online, MJSS?
Hi, sorry, Margaret Smith.
Okay.
I'm speaking as a private citizen, not connected to any committees. And my comments are, I know that Richmond had issues with people building houses on top of mountains, and the fire services were not consulted about that. So if I were building a house, I'd want to be absolutely sure that the fire trucks and emergency vehicles could reach me. The housing there, I'm guessing, is not likely to be affordable housing. And I'm not sure much in Essex is affordable these days, but yeah. And as far as cutting down trees, it breaks my heart to see what happened on Allen Martin Drive. So any tree cutting down is like, and Ken mentioned the road washouts, which was my 4th point. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioners, additional questions? I'm gonna propose a course of action for us. It will require closing the public hearing, but yes, ma'am.
And I'm back. So, just as you've seen me before, I haven't changed my mind. I'm still opposed to the significant woodland removal that'll be required for this project. In light of the recent national elections, there's likely to be a significant slowdown, if not regressive measures around the mitigation of climate change. And for that reason, we need to take as many research-supported steps to blunt the effects of this accelerating crisis on our community. And one of those, my husband's already mentioned, which is extreme weather. And what's predicted here, we're already getting it, we're getting more of it, it's coming, and it's rain. And this is where the preservation of the woodland that would be many acres removed comes in handy. Mature trees are champions in carbon sequestration, soil stabilization, and carbon storage under the soil. We need as much of that nature-based action against climate change as we can possibly get, which is why I'm in the annoying position of talking about not cutting trees down. Cutting trees down, especially a connected woodland, is doubly harmful because not only do you lose the carbon sequestering capacity of the tree, but you also release the stored carbon in the soil. And David didn't give you exact numbers, but I could in terms of, so what would be required canopy trees in the many acreage that would be removed? In order to replace the sequestering capacity of those 25 trees, you need 465 new large landscape trees. And large landscape isn't the saplings that go in developments. Large landscape trees are 25 feet tall. You need 465 of those to duplicate the loss of 35 of the existing medium canopy trees, and there's a lot more medium canopy trees in that woodland than those 35. So what I'm saying is that there were a couple of comments made the last time we had this conversation. Trees grow back. They don't grow back. Or if they do, they are multi-stemmed and compromised in their final growth because they lack a main leader. Now, can trees be planted? Absolutely. Trees will grow. However, the soil stabilization and the sequestering capacity, which we desperately need in the face of the climate emergency, is radically reduced. You need 465 of them to make up for 35 trees, 35 of the many that will be taken down. And those 465 better be 25 feet tall at least to even begin to touch what you need from a climate change and a...
My timer running.
I didn't know I was timing.
You weren't, but I was. That was good.
All right, well, thank you.
Yeah. Who was up first, Sharon or Mukesh? Sharon? You want to go?
I'll go. I'm going to be shorter than that. I am just not seeing the benefit that outweighs the overriding the regulations. And the Housing Act, Act 47, keeps being brought up, but I think if we're going to go to intent, the intent of that act was to provide affordable housing and house the homeless, and I don't see that happening here. And then the other benefit, the looping the water main, I think that was probably something that was needed for the prior development. At least that's my understanding. And that's it.
That's quick. Okay. Mukesh, you're up.
Yeah, I want to thank the Planning Commission and the applicant and the engineer for all the diligence you've been doing a number of years on this application. I know it has not been easy, but I admire everybody's patience in trying to do the right thing. The way I see it currently, I still see quite a few lots. Means I'm not looking at it from an engineer's angle, but like lot number 8, 10, 11, 12 looks pretty steep to me. I don't know how this can be built over there. So my only comment is we have rules and regulations and guidelines, we should follow them. Otherwise, you'll be creating more confusion for future projects. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Do we have anyone else that would like to offer comment? Yes, Brian.
Brian Marcotte, Pinewood Manor. I'd like to say that in our proposal, we're only having one public road being proposed, the majority of it is gonna be, privately owned. They're gonna have their HOA and maintain that, so there's less of a, kind of requirements or cost to the town, other than you're gonna bring in, you know, more taxpayers. And no, it's far from affordable. That's a tough achievement, especially in Chittenden County, and with the lengthy permitting process and so forth. I wish we could be much more affordable. Many things are out of my control. However, we are making an effort to part from our long history of building single-family standalone homes. We're proposing those triplexes, as we mentioned many times, and to get the density. It's a big departure, but I understand times are changing, so we're embracing that. And we're also creating a large area thing where that large area open land will be allowed for a trail. Will be allowed for a trail system, and as the neighborhood can enjoy. But currently, it's just on a just extending that courtesy currently. So, but the benefits. I know I could be biased. I'm a builder, but the benefits are heavier stacked in favor of just the town, the growth of the town, responsible growth, and just expanding this great development.
Okay.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Commissioners, I'm gonna make a suggestion. And it's gonna two stages. One, I'm gonna suggest that we close the public hearing. And the second is I'm gonna suggest that we go into deliberative session to weigh the staff report, which is a suggestion for denial, versus the waiver. I think there's, I want to respect what the applicant has brought forth. I want to respect what the staff has brought forth. And I think the best way for us to do that is in a deliberative session. The twist is I'm not suggesting it for tonight. I'm suggesting the deliberative session to be on 12/14, which really will be the last time we have an opportunity to weigh in on an application within the purview of the Planning Commission. So I think that would give staff time to maybe review specifically the waiver, and maybe even look at, see if there's any way that it can be, there's any wiggle room on it from their perspective. We can have that discussion about the merits of the waiver, the benefits to the town, what the applicant has presented as benefit, what the members of the community have spoken of as detriments, and the benefits outweigh the risks, et cetera, et cetera. But I'd like to suggest we do that in a deliberative session on the 14th. I don't see us getting through that this evening in a reasonable time. We're already at the point where we're pushing our boundary, and we do have another item of significance to address. So that's a discussion topic. How does folks feel about that?
I agree.
Does that allow the applicant or staff to continue to make changes to the waiver request or the application between now and then, or as it is, correct?
The applicant won't be part of the deliberative session.
No, but I mean between now and the 14th.
I don't know that we've ever been in a situation where we've had a deliberative session that's been extended to another time.
Yeah.
So I don't know if we would take additional input between now and then.
I thought the public hearing was closed.
I think we're done. I think
right,
that's
so
it.
It's right.
It's what we have in front of us tonight.
Yep.
But that doesn't mean that your written decision can't look different than this staff report.
And that's why I want to take
Right.
the time, because the written decision, if we went with the staff report, it's denial.
Right.
If we choose to go in a different direction, then we basically have to craft it on the fly.
I agree that a deliberative session is
I agree.
necessary, yeah.
Trevor? Thoughts on what I proposed? Did we lose Trevor?
No, he's there.
No,
That as far as that goes, that you submit them to the clerk tonight.
Already.
You've got them?
Has, yeah.
Okay, so we will have them as part of the discussion. So with that, I would take a motion to close the public hearing, not hearing.
So there is a hand up then.
Ken.
Ken, please.
Yeah, very briefly, the Conservation and Trails Committee certainly is interested in trails, as you could imagine, and I did hear the applicant mention the trails, and we did not see any proposals for easements as part of this development for a trail system.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'll make a motion that we close the public hearing.
I will second.
Moved by Ian, seconded by Georgia, to close the public hearing. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Trevor?
Aye.
Thank you. All any opposed? Motion carries 6-0. Public hearing is closed. I will make a motion that we go into deliberative session with staff on 12/14. Bring this to us tonight. It's been a long road.
Thank you.
It'll be on 12/12.
Excuse me?
That's on 12/12, right?
12/12, whatever the date is, the next meeting.
The December meeting.
The December meeting, thank you.
There's only one.
I wasn't looking at a calendar. I literally didn't have a calendar in front of me, so.
It's only one
If
more.
it's Saturday, it'll be quick. All right. Next item on the agenda is going to be an internal discussion on the State of Vermont Correctional Facility Zoning Amendment Request. And as I stated in the beginning during public comment, I see this as being an opportunity for us to have a discussion on process. What did we hear? What did we not hear? Not necessarily the merits of the request at this stage, but where do we feel we need to go? And I have a second part of that request once we get going. So the first thing I'm gonna ask, this is a straw poll type question to the commission. Before we do anything further, does anybody want to take a stand on saying no now? And the answer isn't no or yes, it's going to be no, or do we want more information? And that's, I think we need to ask that question of ourselves before we go any further. And from a straw poll point of view, this is not a vote or a motion. That's called a mote. It really is just an opinion, and I'll offer my own opinion first, and it's as it was at the last meeting, which I don't think we have enough information.
I agree.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%.
I missed the meeting.
Well, the question still stands. Do you feel we should stop now, or is there more to ask?
I would like more information.
Our clerk,
That's me.
Georgia, we grant her the semi-official role of being more or less a commission coordinator for this discussions as we go forward. Not necessarily tonight, not necessarily at any meeting, but as we need to collate questions, answers, she can work directly with staff and so forth. My visions, my thinking on this is that it will help staff be able to vet some ideas or presentation or what direction we need to go on a little more rapid basis. Not to keep things out of any sort of a public eye, but to be able to package them so that we do things out of any sort of a public eye, but to be able to package them so that we don't have spent half a meeting on discovery, and we can actually have a clear packet of work to look at and the public to look at the same time. So that was just sort of my thinking on this, was to ask if the commission can sort of semi-appoint Georgia as our, I wanted to call her Czar, but I won't.
Feels hard.
As just more or less the coordinator for this. If there's agreement, if there's anybody who has any, questions, there's no clear, absolute defined official role. It's just a coordinator.
Point person.
Yeah.
Person.
Point person.
Do you accept?
Yeah, no, I'm fine with that.
Excellent. Okay. That's the second item on my checklist. So let's talk about what we think. Let's talk about what we think did or did not come out of that last session.
Nothing.
A lot of
I mean, I'm gonna just be blunt. Like, they did not answer hardly any of the questions that were pre-provided to them. They regurgitated everything from the presentation. They were not prepared for the questions that we were going to ask. And I also think that maybe the request needs to be a little bit more specific.
I concur. I agree 100%. They didn't
Okay.
really give us any information whatsoever.
You weren't there, Sue, but you've seen most of the information that's in front of us. Any thoughts on what you're?
No, I was really bummed that I missed that meeting, but yeah, I'm gonna go with what you guys are asking. Let's get some clarity around the information and the questions that are being put to them.
There is the valid question about approval, a waiver being generically for all state land as well that hasn't been identified.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if I read it that way, that it's all state land or it's just drop this regulation, which would open it up not
Right.
just to them, but to
Right.
anybody.
Right.
Or do they want to say, can you designate these areas just like you did Woodside for us? Like,
Right.
I think those are the two competing things that I think the community and even this commission are in agreement as to what they're actually asking.
So, go ahead.
No, I was under the impression they kind of were like, do whatever you want as long as you.
So I guess I have a little bit of a harsher thought process or approach. Number one, as I'd like to start nailing them down on the answers to the questions, and I don't really want to accept we'll tell you the answers when we decide what parcel it's going to be.
Yeah.
You know, so that's number one. As I would like to start drilling down as far as very defined questions, and it might take some some different types of requests. I'd also like us to decide, independent of the state, is one lot better than another? And maybe we tell them we're not going to entertain on lot A. We don't even want to talk about lot A because it's too major for us. Maybe I'm not saying lot A or lot B right now.
Right.
You're just saying, yeah.
But
One
we
of
tell
the
them
two, which one?
what we'll entertain it on, or we won't.
Right.
If they want it to be unrestricted option to any parcel that the state owns. I don't know how many parcels of land the state owns. I mean, Mr. Seaver brought that up more than once.
Yep.
Which they didn't even bother to have the information.
Right. So I don't see us being limited to say that it's going to be, all the lands, and we're just going to get rid of the correctional center designation. It's not their purview to tell us that. It's our purview to decide if we want to apply a correctional center overlay onto an existing zone.
Right.
And if so, what zones might work, what that might be appropriate. Quite frankly, anything residential I would not think would be appropriate.
Agreed.
So I think it's time to maybe stop being nice and listening to presentations and start making them come up with numbers and specifics and so forth to find out whether or not this is
Property values are gonna go down and all this. I don't know if that's true or not. I'm not seeing that on the Shelburne Road corridor. Those are just going up and up and up. And so I do think that that's important information. What is fact and what is fear, and making that decision as well. And I don't know where to get that information, but I think that if it's out there, it would be good for us to have that. Is there an impact? Is there an adverse impact on property value?
Well, I think you're also talking about, on Shelburne Road in South Burlington, you're talking about a 50-year-old prison. So
Right.
that 50-year-old prison's been there a long time, and a lot of that buildup has gone, is much more recent than that. So
Yep.
Getting past the idea of having a prison built in your neighborhood is long since been gone in that area. So there's a difference between building a facility in a neighborhood or near a neighborhood that's new. Like, that's the kind of value that we need to understand. How does that happen in other areas?
Yeah.
Where
What is the actual impact?
Right.
Because there's probably one. I just don't know what it is.
I think we know the major impact is Club New England closed because it was proximity to the prison.
Oh my gosh.
I remember
I do.
Club New England.
I know what it is.
Sorry, you can't keep me super serious this many hours in a row. It's just a.
I think that's important data points to know.
I
Hang on, it's okay, it's okay.
That was the demise of 8084, wasn't it?
Probably.
Okay,
I agree with what Stephanie's saying. I also think we need to maybe do some research on our own and speak to either police chief or fire captain or somebody from emergency services, either in Essex who can answer these questions or in South Burlington, from South Burlington.
so here's the other thing, when we start getting into that.
Yeah.
We probably need our own requests for the numbers from South Burlington, whoever covers
Yeah.
at the jail, whoever's a covering agency, so whether it's St. Mike's, whether it's Essex, whether it's Burlington Rescue, what are the surrounding areas? And the other thing that we don't have on, we have to understand our services need to look at those numbers as well, because our services are, with the exception of police, are volunteer. So
Yeah.
what are the impacts to rescue? What are the impacts to fire? What are the, and are they, what's the population of residents in the correctional center that were, when those calls were made? I mean, was the
Right.
population the same size as what they're proposing for Essex? Were they smaller? Were they larger? So the impact to our services has not been addressed at any level at this point. And our services are different than the services in South Burlington.
Correct.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of detail that has not been provided, and I think we've been nice in giving them opportunities to give that stuff to us.
I think the only new piece I got out of that presentation was that Vermont State Police will have jurisdiction over the prison, not the town.
What about the parking lot? What about
That I don't know. And
Right.
and again, going back to it's the emergency services. How many trips are they making a day to the facility? And if it's all
think
volunteer, that's a huge thing.
I think it's maybe even more than just the facility itself, right? When we're talking about what naturally happens when a facility gets built is that families move closer there. So is there an increase in strain on our first responders just based on the transition of family housing that's going on around the prison, right? So, I mean, not to be...
and yes.
We haven't talked about it yet, but I also think economic impact, if we could, I don't know who could speak to us about that, but there would probably be some economic impact from service providers, from staff, from families. I mean, I'm thinking mostly service providers, honestly. So I don't know if somebody from the Economic Development Committee or Jean or somebody could speak to that. Doesn't seem like we need jobs in Essex, but it would provide some jobs. I don't know.
So we have the southern part of the state who's, they've been through this, so they have other areas in Vermont that have gone through this.
Yeah.
So it isn't all complete new.
Yeah, like isn't Swanton's the most newest? Well,
Springfield?
Springfield.
is
I think.
Springfield newer than Swanton? But
Well, Virgins is going through this at the moment now,
Right.
too. So,
With the juvenile, yeah.
with
the juvenile,
Yeah, which
Yeah,
we
it's
used
a
to
slightly
have.
different
We
facility,
had
but-
up until 2020.
I don't know if we've had any contact with the state since our last presentation, but maybe they are more advanced than our presentation.
maybe they learned their lesson.
But you would think that.
You're-
they would
I don't
tell
want a
us if
presentation. I want answer.
I think you're.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We walked away from the last meeting like questions.
So I did get an email from them just saying, they saw our agenda item, do you want us there to talk about it? I said, no, this is just the planning commission discussing next steps and where they think. They had no indication that they had any more.
They don't. Guarantee.
I mean, I'm not going to say I suspect their numbers, but I suspect their numbers. And anybody who develops a report is going to generally develop a report to prove a point, not necessarily the raw data. So I really would like, from my perspective, I think knowing what the call volumes were for fire, independent of rescue. Now, in South Burlington, do fire and rescue both respond every time there's a call? Or if there's strictly a rescue call, do they go on their own? Or if there's strictly a fire alarm, does fire go on their own? We have a volunteer fire service. Do we have the ability to respond to a fire alarm routinely, daily, at a correctional facility? I don't know. I mean, this is where we don't have enough information to know the true impact. And this isn't even touching on really what a lot of the folks have said about not wanting to have the prison.
Like, for instance, like, what would make the residents whole if there's this thing, and if the state is willing to consider developing on two different properties, you only need to develop on one property, like, what could be potentially the benefit of the other property for the community? Like, what's
they're give and take.
like the offsetting thing
Yeah.
that people could really like? So, and there may be other state properties or other opportunities to provide.
But that's the carrot, right?
You know,
That's
well, it's like,
Right.
I think for them trying to have, like, it's not just a technical thing. You know, it's how does this fit into the
it isn't just a technical thing, but there are a lot of technical things that they haven't given us yet.
Sure, yeah, right.
You know, I think we've got to build off from one. And if we, for example, if Site A is going to cost, I don't know, I'm picking a number out of there, 25 million to build because of the infrastructure's got to be redone, road, and Site B is going to cost 10 million to build, you know, do we look at that and say, we're going to rule Site A out? Do they rule? I mean, they should be able to start giving us some of that guidance now, from their perspective. And we should be able to say from our perspective, if one or the other is, we're going to rule one out right off the bat, you know, or how can we do, if we do a correctional overlay, like I would not want to make a correctional facility and allow juice in an industrial zone. It might make it a conditional, or might create a correctional overlay that could be put on a particular spot into community, like we've done with the scenic overlay.
For the existing regulation, it's specific to a particular.
Yeah. I don't know. It seems like we need to maybe get in a little more in the weeds, and we did some very specific questions, I thought, last time, but maybe we need to be even more specific and not have a show and tell presentation, but actually have them submit a report back to us that addresses those questions, and then we discuss how we feel the responses go. But this is where, like, you know, Georgia can do some of that lifting for putting things in a readable order for us.
Being the czar that she is.
Yeah. Our corrections are. Anyways, I mean, this is, I understand that we need to find out, I'm talking too much, sorry. Gotta be quiet for a minute. Jump in while you can, because there's not.
Well, I also wonder about, they wanted to put the juvenile center in, was it Newberry or something? And they said no. I would, you know, they've gone through, I will welcome it into our community, or Springfield, or one of the other newer ones. Because Chinnen Correctional is hard ones. Because Chinnen Correctional is hard because it's old. And I think that South Burlington is just, it's just always been there. I'll just put that in quotes. So it's just part of their fabric.
Fabric of that, right?
Yeah, of their city. And I think it's very different when you're asking it to come into a different, I mean, I grew up near a town that had the work camp. I grew up in the Northeast Kingdom. You know, I didn't see significant impacts a town over, but that town did. It would be just interesting to see how they went through the process and how they felt forthcoming with state laws.
So maybe we invite like a Zoom session with the town planner from.
I would have to double check, but it began with an N somewhere. It was like Newberry or.
Newfane?
No, not Newfane. That's where I'm from.
Okay.
It's too small.
We can figure it out.
Yeah.
But that, and even for Jens, and just, I mean, it's a
Yep.
Zoom call, you know.
Yeah, I'd be
We can-
curious to hear about Virgins.
And I don't know that we would need the state to be participants in that.
Oh, God,
No.
no. Oh, sorry.
Well, no, I mean, it's for openness. I mean, we're not trying to close things off, but I mean, these are our questions.
Well, you're doing it, and you're doing your own independent I don't want to call it investigation, but we're doing our own independent
Due
research.
diligence.
Because if you
Yeah.
rely on the state to give us everything, they're only going to give you the
It's gonna be
positive
skewed.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be, in my eyes, it'll be a little bit skewed because it's
Yeah.
their project.
Yeah.
So I think we have to do our own
Yeah.
independent journalism.
Because the big piece of information I got from the meeting the other night was the low amount of pilot money. The pilot, it was
Oh,
like
God, it's
$5,000,
yeah.
and I thought it was missing zero. This can't be. And a member of the audience brought that up too.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, we have to dig down and figure out a little more what
Yeah,
is
what
in
do-
it for the
yeah,
town
what
as
do we
well.
get in return?
It's clear what's in it for the state, but what is in it for the town.
So Catherine, would you envision this, since this is gonna carry over into the next year, the planning commission's new mission? Is this something that we potentially could have as a standing agenda item for setting up workshops, calls, or whatever?
Or would you see that as soon as your next meeting? I'm trying to think what else we have on that agenda. There will be the deliberative session for one.
I would think we delay everything at this
Delay.
point until the new missions, that we kick over into January for the new
I
mission.
mean, that makes sense. I think your next meeting is going to be busy now, but I'm thinking.
And then we can figure out how to, we probably need to schedule a few, public review sessions and, figure out the best way to move that forward, gather the information, present it and or discuss it, and,
How much of a workshop is it?
yeah. And that'll be, there'll just be planning, so we won't have to worry about, application review at that point
Right.
either. Okay. And I would think in the meantime, if you have thoughts and you guys can come up with some of the roadmap for those discussions, that would be great. Because then we're not just trying to craft it on the fly. And I know you've got ideas. You both, it's there. And
There's been some great things brought up here tonight too.
okay.
I have a comment to a question, which kind of relates to the would, and as well as this, for the deliberative session. Did you invite all members going to be the DRB? Aware of it?
We didn't do it as part of the motion. We can revise the motion to do that. We could invite the DRB, but I don't think, actually at this point, probably not. Because we're either gonna come out of it, with something, and that'll be passed on to the DRB.
I was thinking more for the experience all for them.
Yeah, I actually did think about that, but they don't come into existence until,
No, agreed.
No, but it would be good for at least for the Pinewood piece to see the.
Yeah, I wouldn't think the prison
Yeah.
makes a difference.
no, but it's, so we can either add a motion or revise the motion that was made earlier. But the applicants are gone, so I don't know if we can.
Would you have to revise the motion? You're just inviting. Oh, I guess you would. I'm sorry.
Right, yeah.
Yes, you
I-
would.
I made the
I'm
motion
sorry.
to- I made the
My
motion to
bad.
include staff.
Right.
Yep.
I think you could make it at the next, revise it.
To include members, so we could extend it if any members of the future DRB are present, we can include them in a observation, for observation purposes.
Planning commission didn't.
Well, then it's the same planning committee.
Well, we have new ones, so. for example,
But it won't carry over to the planning commission. I think that's the point. The planning commission, it'll be done with the planning commission the next meeting.
Yep.
And there are no different members of the planning. First.
So let's just remind
Planning commission is the same.
remind me or whatever at that meeting before we go into deliberative, because we'll have to make a motion to go into deliberative. And we'll need a place to do that. We'll either have to kick everybody out or we'll move upstairs or whatever, but,
Could even meet earlier. Something to do as an option.
We could also ask the holidays, we might.
so the deliberative piece we need to have anyway. So at this point, we could potentially have the deliberative session at 6 p.m. We've got time to make that, so Does anybody have any issues or conflicts with that?
30 minutes enough?
No, but that we can start there, and if the doors are closed for deliberative session, nobody will be allowed in until we're.
Yep.
And we could just note that the primary meeting will begin with a deliberative session. Oh, we still gotta call it in public here.
And maybe you've gotta meet somewhere else though too, because, Town Meeting TV.
Let's do that then, stick with that. If members of the DRB are present, we'll make a motion to include them in the deliberative session.
Yep, I think we can, I'll reach out. Just to where we have one of them. And Sharon, I think, is on.
Okay, yeah. She's still there too, so okay. Any other thoughts on that aspect of the? Okay. Did we talk long enough that everybody forgot what they were doing?
Where are we?
We're getting ready to do the minutes.
It's been a long day.
Sure has.
It has been a long week.
This has been meetings all day.
Yep.
Heavy meetings all day.
Yep.
So I need a motion for the minutes from 10:10.
I'll make a motion, we approve the minutes of the meeting from October 10th.
Seconded.
Does anyone want to add for any edits to the minutes from 10:10 as presented to us?
Oh, a little punchy here.
Hearing no adjustments, all those in favor of the minutes as written signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes carry 6-0. Take a motion for the minutes of 10:24.
I'll make a motion, we approve the minutes from 10:24.
Seconded.
So I think found something in here, Sharon, and I apologize for not sending it to you ahead. And I don't know what it was because I was on a different computer when I checked it.
Well, if it's like a grammatical or something, just let.
Okay. So I don't have anything drastic. So anyone have any edits to the minutes from 10:24?
None.
Hearing none. All those in favor of the minutes from 10:24?
Aye.
Aye. Trevor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 6-0. That's minutes from 10:24. We don't have an executive or deliberative session tonight. Do we have any other business to attend to? Then I would take a motion.
Move we adjourn.
Second.
Seconded by Stephanie. She got ahead of it. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned. Motion carries 6-0. Thank you. Thank you, folks, for sticking with us.